Hey guys, welcome to another video by Theterrainguy. This video series I'm going to do is going to be a multi-part series based on the game of Flames of War. So it's going to move a little bit away from the terrain aspect and a little more towards the gameplay, what makes up the game, what the figures look like, what the various figures are, what the dice look like, the tokens, the source books, the templates, the rule book, how it's laid out, how the game works, like game mechanics, some tactics. Basically, I'm going to cover everything I can possibly think of for Flames of War without actually reading you the rule book and photographing every page of the source books for you. So there's lots of places I could start, but I thought what I'd do is I thought I would start with I think the coolest thing in the game. Obviously, the game's structured around minis, so I thought let's go into showing you some minis from the game, and then I'll maybe move into some of the game aids and what you're actually going to need. So basically right down here I just put a smattering of different sized models, different types of models, different types of figures that are in the game. So let's start at the most basic model and the smallest of the figures. That would be your command bases. So hopefully the camera picks that up very well. This is command bases are your smaller bases. They're typically modeled with 3 figures. These are for if you have an infantry unit, they would be like your HQ, your second in command, some of your observer teams or platoon leaders are done on the small bases. So they are typically modeled with 3, although there is nothing in the game that says you have to have 3 models on there. You can have 1 or 2. I believe there's nothing that says you can't have more than 3 or less than 3. But typically people model them with 3 to show that they are some sort of leader stand. There is some special units like snipers and mortar teams and anti-tank units that also are on the command bases, but for the most part there's some sort of leader. Next we'll move into the infantry bases. I have 2 here. These are Russians, and not that it makes any difference. These are typically modeled, and just to mention, these are twice the size of the command bases. So it's basically 2 command bases put together, although they are still solid. These are typically modeled with 4 to 5 characters. Usually I model mine with 4, just because it gives a little more room to do your little scenic stuff on there. So it gives a little more room, gives a little more story. You can kind of see see the great paint job that in this case other people did for me. Thanks a lot, Sentinel Painting Miniatures. Great job. These are the Russians I just received. So and then you can kind of do some work on them. But let's move back to the figures for a second. These are your infantry stands, or and I'll move away from that. And they also could be like a heavy machine gun team or something like that. So anything that's not really a command base that is infantry structured is going to be on a base like this, mortar teams and other things like that. So that's what you're going to typically look at. And again, you can do up the bases as detailed as you want. So these are kind of cool with the sandbags and all that. So that's infantry. Let's keep moving. Next, I'll move over to artillery base. This is essentially 2 medium bases put together. Again, it's solid. And then this is actually done for a rocket team. So really cool miniatures. That's one. There's another artillery piece here. This is actually an anti-tank gun, but it's on an artillery base. So again, lots of cool stuff. And there's other things like this is kind of a unique artillery piece because it's a rocket truck, but again on the artillery base. This is considered a large base. Sorry about the coloring there. This is a large base. The ones I just showed you a minute ago with the infantry, those are medium bases, and the command bases are a small base. So moving away from the base size, should note that the objective markers, and this is an objective-based game typically, there's anywhere between 4 and 2 objectives, and they are always modeled on a large base. So this one here is some Sturm Tiger rockets with a wall and a scientist and camera crew, so it's kind of a cool one. but they're always modeled on this size base. Then let's move into the vehicles. There's a wide range of vehicles. This is by no means even tip of the iceberg of what's available, but here's a truck. And what it shows I chose this truck here because this one's actually modeled on a medium base. Vehicles do not have to be mounted on any base size. They can or cannot be. This one in this case is. And this is a half track here that is not. So it does not have to be on a base. I, for the most part, actually like them not on bases because it allows you to put them on a road, and then the road actually acts as your base. So this is a half track, not on a base. I'm going to actually move over and show you a small tank or a light tank. This is T-3485. I actually believe this is maybe classed as a medium tank, but this is on the smaller size. So, and tanks come much smaller than this even. So. And the good thing about them is they actually come with magnets, so you can magnetize, if you can hear that, and then you can rotate your turret, and if you happen to have them upside down in your carrying case, your turret's not going to fall off. So that's great. Also, when you blow the tank up, or if it gets destroyed, you can take off the turret, put a little puff of smoke right here, and it makes it look like it's destroyed. So it's much like removing weapons in 40K. So. Then we're going to move over to a true medium tank. This is the Panther here. So, again, nicely detailed, tons of stowage and all that good stuff. You can they don't come with the commanders mounted in. It's your option. So you can have a closed turret or a closed hatch if you like. This one actually doesn't have a magnetized turret, not yet, anyways, but still fits in nice and snug. It's not going to come off. The disadvantage is you can't turn it over. So. That's the only thing why I would highly recommend magnetizing the turret. Then I'm going to move over to a heavy tank. This is an IS-2. It's a Russian tank here. This one, again, magnetized turret. Nicely detailed. And really, I mean, some of the tanks are very close in size. Some are a little smaller. I'll bring this T-34 back over so you can see. It's a little bit smaller. But really, it's totally up to you what you choose to have in your army. You can have an entire army of light tanks, or you can have an entire army of heavy tanks, or a mixture of tanks and infantry. That's completely up to you. So really, that's a brief intro to the models. Like I said, I'll cover those again when I start doing the rules and stuff, but let's speed it along here. I won't probably get to the rulebook in this one, but let's just cover some of the game aids, and I will just briefly mention that, in fact, that you do need a rulebook. So here's the rulebook here. This is the hardcover. It's awesome because it is full color all the way through. So there's no black and white. They did not skimp on the rulebook at all. It's nicely laid out. The stuff that you need to know is in italics. The fluff is in plain text, but you can certainly read it all. But if you're quickly looking for a rule, it's the italicized text that you need to know. So I'll cover that in more detail, probably several videos on that. Another thing that you will need is a source book. Now, unlike 40K, it's not Germans in one book and British in another book. It's actually structured based on typically battles or time periods. So, for instance, this one here is a late war book that covers the Battle of Warsaw from August 1944. So in here you're actually going to get, just flicking through, you actually get several Russian armies as well as several German armies. So you could play Russians or Germans, or if you played both, which I have in front of you, this book's great because it has an army from each one. There's many, many source books, and I'll get into some of those after. So just quickly speeding along here, this is an artillery template, something that you will need if you have artillery or planes. And it's got, just put this in the back here, it's got several, you can see my camera, that doesn't work. It has several key pieces of information that you can quickly source by looking on here without having to consult the rulebook. And the last thing I wanted to cover in this video here was the dice sets. These come unit specific. You don't have to buy these, but they're nice fluff. This is for the 12th SS. It comes with dice with unit markings, so the 6 is marked by the unit, and then normal numbers for everything else, as well as several tokens. So there's dug in, ranged in, and a few others. And I'll get into those more in detail. So that'll end part 1, so tune in for part 2. Cheers.